Greetings in the name of Jesus Christ and welcome to today's episode of Countdown to Christ Ministries. I am Marco Kiroglu. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to our channel. And if our ministry has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting us with your donation. For donations, simply go to www.countdowntochrist.com/donate. Now today, I want to draw your attention to one of the most amazing books of the entire Bible. The most exciting book, definitely the most exciting book of the entire Bible. The book of Revelation. You know, the book of Revelation is an amazing book of prophecy pertaining the entire grace era, entire church age. And also, this amazing book of prophecy reveals to us great details of information, great amount of detailed information in regards to how the church age will come to an end, how Jesus Christ will come back, how Jesus Christ will defeat the Antichrist, how the believers will be taken up to heaven, how Jesus Christ will then establish his millennial kingdom for 1,000 years and will rule the world for 1,000 years with his saints. All of that is given to us in great details. All of that information given to us in great details in the book of Revelation, which is just an amazing book of prophecy from the pen of Apostle John. And he received a revelation directly from Jesus Christ himself. And you know, there is more. There's a lot of interesting, amazing details about this book. But one detail that, again, I want to draw your attention to is the fact that this book begins with a stated specific blessing for those who will take the time to read and study this book. Did you know that? Right at the beginning of the book of Revelation, in chapter 1, verse 3, it says, "Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near." There is a very specific blessing for those who will take the effort to study, to memorize, and to keep in their heart expectantly all the prophecies in this book. Now, this blessing is also repeated. The very same blessing is also repeated right at the end of the book of Revelation. In chapter 22, at the very end, in verse 7, it says again, Jesus says, "Behold, I am coming quickly. Blessed is he who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book." What an amazing book is the book of Revelation. But as amazing as it is, as wonderful as it is, did you know the book of Revelation today is the most ignored portion of the whole Bible by Christians? Christians all over the world seem to be just shying away from this book. I pray that you will take the time to study this book, read this book prayerfully, and take delight in this book, because there is a special blessing pronounced upon those who will do so. Now, I want to take you now to the very first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation. Did you know in these 3 chapters there are 7 letters written to 7 churches? Now, did you know there are 3 layers of understanding, 3 different layers of interpreting these 7 letters? First layer is that these 7 churches literally existed, and they were real churches filled with real believers like you and me, at specific locations, and their locations are also clearly specified here. These days there are some critics of the book of Revelation. They will come up and say, no, the book of Revelation is entirely allegorical and these churches never existed. What a nonsense is that? You know, these churches, these 7 churches, all happen to be located in the southwestern part of modern day Turkey. And those of you who watch our programs regularly, I'm sure you know that I'm actually Turkish origin. I was born in Turkey. I'm still Turkish citizen. Turkey is my home country by birth. And I have been to the locations of some of these 7 churches. They really indeed existed. They really were indeed civilizations in those very locations and churches in those civilizations, in those societies. So this is not an allegory, this is a truth. These churches existed. That's the first layer of interpreting these 7 letters. The second layer of interpretation is even more complex, actually. The second layer says these 7 letters actually, these 7 churches actually represent 7 types of churches that will coexist in Christianity throughout the lifetime of Christianity. Approximately it's 2,000 years. So at any time in church history, you will find that any given church will be one of these 7 churches. Now ask yourself, which one of your church, your local congregation, into which one of these 7 churches does your local congregation look most likely? Most like which one of them? So that second interpretation says, therefore these letters to the 7 churches is ever relevant, ever important for Christians throughout their 2,000 years of lifetime before the rapture, before the second coming of Christ. So in that case, you need to read this not as a letter written to some ancient churches at an ancient time, but read it carefully, that it is actually written to you and your church as well. And definitely your local congregation is at least one of these 7 churches. It might be a combination of 2 as well. So the third interpretation, that is for me even more exciting. The third interpretation of these 7 letters to the 7 churches is that these 7 churches, as listed in the book of Revelation, represent 7 consecutive dispensations within the church era. 7 consecutive seasons in the life of Christianity. So the first season in the life of Christianity was its season of infancy that we find represented in the church of Ephesus. And when you read the letter to the church of Ephesus, you can relate that this was the passionate infant church in its very early stage. And then after that follows the church of Smyrna. The church of Smyrna and letter to the church of Smyrna is more in relation to the season right after the season of the infancy that is seen in the church of Ephesus. If you follow it that way, you come all the way to the 7th church, which is our church, which is our season, which is the season in which we find ourselves. Did you know we are currently in the season of the church of Laodicea? And your congregation, your church, our global Christianity is perfectly fitting into the definition and the characteristics of the church of Laodicea. When you read this letter, there is almost nothing to be happy about. It's a very sad letter, full of warnings, very stern warnings from Jesus. And Jesus says, you are lukewarm. If you don't get cold or hot, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. What a sad letter to what a bad state of church. But that's our season, where we are. That is the very last season right before the rapture. Now, you may say, well, sir, how do you know it is right before the rapture? I'm going to show you straight from the book of Revelation that it is indeed right before the rapture. Right after the 7th church, there happens the moment of rapture. And there is no more church after the church of Laodicea. There is no more season of Christianity after the church of Laodicea. There is no church number 8. Church number 7, the church of Laodicea. The season of Laodicea is the very last season in Christianity. And the last church, the church of Laodicea, and letter to this last church, happens to be in the very last portion of the book of Revelation, chapter 3. Once you finish reading chapter 3, verse 22, Jesus says, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And there the letter is concluded. The letter to the church of Laodicea is concluded. Also, I understand that the season of the church of Laodicea is concluded. And then we move to the next verse. The next verse is found in chapter 4, verse 1. And this is what it says. And after these things, after 7 consecutive seasons of churches, after these 7 seasons of churches, after these things, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, Come up here, I will show you the things which must take place after this. What we just read here is the moment of rapture. In chapter 4, verse 1, what we are reading is Jesus calling his church, his believers, out of this world into heaven. The door in heaven stands open, and the voice sounds like a trumpet, the trumpet of God sounding. And Jesus calling his church, come up here now. Come up now, out of the world. From the very early church, from the days of apostles, from the very early believers, all the way to the Roman Catholic Church taking over the spectrum of Christianity. All the early believers firmly believed that these 7 churches represented 7 seasons of churches that will happen throughout the church history, and the Laodicean church will be the last season, and after that the heavens door will be open, and the trumpet will sound, and Christ will call his church out of this world, and that will be the rapture, and after that church will be taken out of the way. But then there came the Roman Catholic Church, and Roman Catholic Church mixed Christianity with Gnosticism and Greek philosophy, and one of the first things they did was to completely delete and eradicate the eschatological understanding of Bible prophecy, and especially the book of Revelation. With that, they completely deleted away the blessed hope that Jesus is going to come back and take his church out of the world. This, what we read in chapter 4, Revelation chapter 4, verse 1, is our blessed hope. That is exactly what early believers were firmly holding on to. They were waiting for the day the door in heaven will be opened and the trumpet will sound and Jesus will call his church up to heaven. That's why Apostle Paul referred to it as the great mystery, as the blessed hope. That's why you find this again and again mentioned as the hope of the believers. But then comes the Roman Catholic Church and destroys the Bible prophecy, and the Roman Catholic Church says, no, the book of Revelation is entirely allegorical and it has nothing to do with eschatology. It has nothing to do, no relevancy to anybody. And today, unfortunately, still many Christians believe so because of those bad lies they produced. But the truth is, no, this is our blessed hope. And then there comes 1882. Of course, before 1882, there came the Reformers. Reformers tried to rediscover the pure gospel, but they stayed short. They remained short of a lot of things. One of them was Reformers did not really identify and correct the problem of anti-Semitism that was so deeply embedded in European Christianity. Unfortunately, instead of uncovering and fixing that problem, they further threw fuel into it. And because of that, Nazis could go and commit those atrocities, and then they will say, we did what we did because we learned our theology from Martin Luther. And besides that, even John Calvin, he wrote commentaries on every book of the Bible except the book of Revelation. Why will that great reformist study every book of the Bible, but he would not study the one book which starts with a blessing and ends with a blessing, and which would not write a commentary on that? Interestingly, later on, the students of John Calvin were the ones who spent a lot of time in studying the book of Revelation and rediscovering the blessed hope that is here clearly, plainly written for us in chapter 4, verse 1, and connecting the dots suddenly, and then rediscovering the theology of premillennialist understanding and rapture before 7-year tribulation and the millennial rule of Christ. And with all of that, today we live in this world, in this global Christianity. There is so much mishmash, so much confusion out there, and as a result of that, unfortunately, many Christians still do not understand the great significance of the book of Revelation and the great significance of holding on to the promise of Jesus that he will come back to take us from this world. He will open the door of heaven and call us out to himself. After all, didn't Jesus say in John chapter 14 from verse 1 to 3 that he is going to his Father's house to prepare a room for us, and once that has happened, that is ready, he will come and take us to be with him? You find that same teaching in writings of Apostle Paul over and over throughout his letters. The blessed of the great mystery. In 1 Corinthians 15 from 50 to 55, from 15 from verse 50 to 52, Apostle Paul also says, I'm telling you a great mystery now. Not all of us will sleep, but some of us will be taken out of this world alive. And even those who have fallen asleep, they will be awakened and given glorified bodies. Again, referring to this very incident in Revelation chapter 4 verse 1, the moment of rapture. So now, bringing all of that together, as you have seen, the church era has been divided in the book of Revelation to 7 consecutive seasons. And the last season is the season of the Laodicean church, the lukewarm church. And we are right now in that season. In fact, we have been in this season for a long while. Most of us were born in this season. Most of us have never experienced the season before the Laodicean church, which was this Philadelphian season. And we are gonna be raptured out of this season, out of this world, out of this lukewarm church. And in the middle of this, Jesus' warnings to the Laodicean church should come to us very personal. It should be a very personal warning for you and for me, because we are this church. We are living in this season. Jesus is saying, you are lukewarm. Look around you, people. Look around you. How many of the churches around you are really holding on to the theology of the Bible, teachings of the Bible? Very, very few these days. Churches are so lukewarm that they are becoming the servants of this world instead of serving Jesus Christ. That is us. That is our season. But the good news is, Jesus says, I'm coming back and I'm going to take you out of this world. And Jesus says, stay firm, hold on to what the Bible teaches, choose to be hot for Jesus Christ, don't be lukewarm. And as this world continues, as this corrupt church continues in its corruption, suddenly in the blinking of an eye, as we read in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, in the blinking of an eye, Jesus Christ will open the door of heaven, and we will hear the trumpet of God sounding, and Jesus will say, come up here. And that will be the moment of rapture. We will go to be with our Lord Jesus Christ. Until that moment, we shall hold on to the teachings of the Bible. If you have never done so, please go study the book of Revelation prayerfully and share the gospel with anybody that is around you. Don't sit idle. Don't sit idle and wait for the rapture, folding your arms and waiting for the rapture. No, that is not the right thing to do. Keep working for Jesus Christ. Share the gospel. Pray for those around you who are not yet saved. And ask the Lord to show you in what ways you can serve him more effectively until the moment he comes and takes us from this world. God bless you and goodbye.